I'm joined now by author of The Latino Century and Latino political consultant, Mike Madrid. Mike, thanks for joining me.
Brian, it's always great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So we have some pretty big news here as the bottom seems to have fallen out with Donald Trump and Latinos, who were, of course, instrumental in his rise to power in this 2024 election cycle. So I'm going to put right here on the screen Donald Trump's approval rating among Hispanics from the AP. You can see that he's got 73% disapprove and 27% approval. That's an 8-point gain in disapproval and a 6-point drop in approval. So some pretty staggering numbers there. First and foremost, what do you attribute this massive shift to?
Well, that's exactly right. Let me just kind of put into context. This is very different from the last time we spoke, which was in the summer, where he was sitting at about a 33, 34% approval rating. They're now down into the 20s. This is getting back into a historical trend line for Republicans before Trump came on the scene. So this is very significant. It may sound a little bit nerdy, but from a technical perspective, Trump is actually falling through his base level fall of support downward and considerably. So it's a big deal. The question then becomes your next question, which is what's driving it? Donald Trump's collapse amongst Latinos began in April, early April, when he had this Liberation Day announcement on tariffs. The economy is overwhelmingly driving this down. There's no question the ICE raids are having a secondary impact and effect on this. That's absolutely true. But his drop in support levels, considerable drop, began 6 weeks before the ICE raids in Los Angeles. It's important for listeners to understand because overwhelmingly and increasingly, the Latino voter is saying that it's affordability and the economy that is driving their voting behavior, not primarily the ICE rates, not immigration. They're both working together to drive the support levels lower. It's ICE rates are clearly having an impact, but they're not the main driver. They're not the main impact of what's happening here. It's the economy, and the economy.
So that would suggest that, the Latino population, notwithstanding the fact that this is still it's not a homogenous block, but still I think with some certainty you can say that the Latino population writ large follows the same trend lines as the rest of the population. Is that right? Because we're seeing the same trajectory among the non-Latino population that's being polled.
That's exactly right. I think the best way to look at it, and again, a lot of people are looking because this is a non-white constituency, is what is the racial or ethnic prism? What is the racial or ethnic issue that is driving these voters? And that's why this kind of stereotype of immigration comes into play. But that's not what the data has said for 30 years, and it's not what the data is saying now. What the data is telling us is that the one cultural characteristic is that this is a blue-collar working class voter that is more price sensitive to things like inflation, to tariffs, which test very, very negatively with Latinos because they work in industries that are going to be the most impacted by them. So yes, it's fair to say, Brian, that this is not unlike voters overall, but most acutely as a lower income, more price sensitive voter. And it's why you're seeing these dramatic swings with Latinos more than any other group that we're testing and looking at right now.
Okay, so clearly outsized influence for economic factors, but we've also seen among the whole population that the way that Trump has handled himself, behaved, comported himself as it relates to immigration is also unpopular. And so what kind of an impact does that have on the Latino population? Is it the same as the rest of the population, or does it have any outsized impact among Latinos as well? Since look, a lot of Trump's policies are aimed at people just for the crime of being brown.
Correct. That's a great way to characterize it. So the short answer is yes, it's having an impact on Latino voters. Yes, it's having a greater impact with Latinos than other non-Latino constituencies. That is absolutely quantifiably accurate. But what I want people to remember is it's not the primary mover. It's definitely become even more than just an immigration issue, not just for Latinos, but broadly, but certainly for Latinos. It's become a government overreach issue. The fact that the government is doing these really egregious things, militarizing our streets, jackbooted masked thugs, tearing children from their mother's arms, coming after teenagers, going into churches, hospital beds. Yes, it is having an outsized impact in the Latino community. And I don't want to suggest that it is not important and it is not cementing a political opinion, because it absolutely is. But the two combined are really what explains this historic drop. Again, it's very rare to see Donald Trump go below a floor of support. Once you kind of get red pilled and do this MAGA thing, it's
Yeah.
hard to break through that fever, but the fever is breaking. broadly amongst Americans. You're seeing support levels in the mid 30s now. Even in COVID, Brian, we were not seeing mid 30s support. He was in the high 30s, low 40s. We're now seeing 37, 36 in a lot of polling. So something is transforming, something is changing. One of the most significant shifts, again, is with Latino voters who are basically, we've seen all of the gains of the Trump era been completely wiped out.
So you had mentioned something that I'm particularly interested in, and that is this idea of getting red pilled. And I think for so much of the population, it feels like politicians are on a race to calcify these voters, however they may be polarized. And so you want voters to start to combine their identity with their political affiliation, so that this time, the next time there's an election and they have an R or a D next to the candidate's name, and you've identified as a Republican or a Democrat, it's going to be that much easier to keep those people in your stable, and of course to make them lifelong Democrats or Republicans. To what extent do you think that phenomenon is happening or not happening among the Latino population? Because this kind of movement suggests that there's pretty low calcification among, the polarization of that electorate.
Boy, that's a very astute observation and 100% accurate. A lot of people have erroneously suggested that we are witnessing a racial realignment. I have always pushed back against that narrative. There is very little, almost no evidence suggesting that Latino voters are becoming more conservative or more Republican. So why, Mike, if you say that, why are they voting more Republican? The best answer, the best explanation is what we're witnessing is a de-alignment. Economic populism with Latinos is greater than it is with any other constituency. Again, a younger, poorer, less college educated group that stands to reason, but they're affiliating less with the Democratic Party as they're affiliating less with both parties. And Democrats have a longer way down to go because they started from a stronger position of strength. So Latinos are the most likely ethnic group to have a no party preference, to not affiliate with Democrats or Republicans. It is the swingiest vote in American politics by far. It's the only group that's essentially breaking 50-50 between the voter groups. But as I was explaining to a reporter last night, it's not that half of Latinos are voting for Republicans and half are voting for Democrats. It's better explained by saying half of Latinos are voting against Republicans and half are voting against Democrats. And once you
Right.
understand that as a party, you can start to recapture these voters. There will be a return of a lot of these Trump curious Latinos from the Republican Party to the Democrats in the midterms. That will happen. The only question is how big it's going to be.
So I know that labels are not particularly important. I know that real voters out there don't hew to the labels, in the way that people give them, that voters are weird. And that, we've seen plenty of election cycles where somebody's first choice will be, Ted Cruz, their second choice will be Bernie Sanders, their third choice will be, Pete Buttigieg, and their fourth will be Donald Trump. So nobody really fits into these neat little buckets in the way that we think about them. But at the same time, you had mentioned that this is a more economically populist group, and a lot of the Democratic candidates, especially who've been espousing economic populism, are the more are the farther left. Sometimes they'll put their own labels as democratic socialist or socialist, and that's breaking my mind a little bit, because the way that we've thought about the Latino population in the past is that the last thing that you want to be is have any adherence to socialism, because that's been such a boogeyman in the past as it relates to the Latino community. And so how do you reconcile those two things that at least in my mind are seemingly in conflict?
Well, again, another great question. So let me dispel the socialism myth here. The socialism communism label works with a very small subset of Latinos. Those are Cubans and Venezuelans. Combined, that's about 6%, 6% of the entire Latino electorate. More importantly, 90% of that is concentrated in the southern part of Florida. So it has never been something that is going to resonate with Mexican Americans, Central
Right.
Americans, Dominicans, or certainly Puerto Ricans who are Americans by birth. Those combined make up the massive amount of Latinos. So whenever you hear somebody trying to win or scare Latino voters by using the socialism moniker, they're not moving the needle at all. They're not even talking to the audience. Having said that, it's really important to listen to any of the politicians in the Democratic coalition that are using economic populism as a tool, and that runs from a Zoran Mamdani who is winning back a lot of these New York City Latino working class voters who defected to Trump just 8 months ago are now coming back in droves to this candidate. But they're also moving towards a Ruben Gallego in Arizona, who's setting the centrist, more conservative, if you will, flank in the Democratic Party. So why is it that both of these candidates and both these candidacies are appealing to these voters? The answer isn't just in the economics, it's in the populism. Both of these candidates were very critical and are still very critical of their own party's establishment for not prioritizing these issues, whatever they are. They're clearly not ideological. Latinos are not ideological voters in the same way others are, but they're very anti establishment voters. It's why Bernie Sanders was winning many of the same precincts that Donald Trump won in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas or the urban core of Los Angeles. These voters are saying we need help. They're not feeling that they're getting it from their own party and certainly not the system in American politics today.
And so, what would your recommendation be for any Democrat who's looking to bolster their flanks with the Latino population? What would your recommendation for those folks be?
It's going to sound a little bit peculiar, but I'm going to say lead with economics, regardless of what your ideological persuasion is. Latino voters are so desperate to hear about economics that they're going to, again, a Mamdani, a Democratic Socialist, a Bernie Sanders, a Donald Trump, a Ruben Gallego.
Right.
The thing that all of these characters, all of four of these politicians have in common is they're challenging the orthodoxy of their own establishment, of their own parties, and saying we need something different. And they're talking about it through an economic lens. If you want to win Latino voters, I'm not going to tell you that it's a silver bullet economic issue on the left, on the center, or the right. But what I am going to tell you is if you characterize your own belief system in challenging the structures of both major parties and the American system broadly, you're going to see results. You will get traction because just focusing on it and making it the centerpiece is everything that this working class, struggling, working poor community wants and has not received from either party from their estimation.
Perfectly put. We'll leave it there. Mike, how can folks who are watching right now hear more from you?
I write regularly on these topics. My Substack on The Great Transformation is the name of my newsletter, or follow me on X at Madrid_Mike.
Awesome. Mike, as always, thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Brian. Thanks for your good work out there.